The First Fiji Expedition, undertaken by the United States, occurred in October of 1855 during the Civil War on the islands. In response to alleged arson attacks on American commercial agent in Nukulau, the Navy sent a warship to demand compensation for the attack from the self-proclaimed King of Fiji, Cakobau. The first incident that led to the American expedition was in 1849, when the house owned by Agent John Brown Williams was hit by cannon fire and burned. The Fijians were celebrating Independence Day when cannonballs fell on the building. The second incident happened the same year as the expedition involving Williams. Another accidental fire on Nukulau destroyed his store, and some Fijians looted what remained. The warship sent, the John Adams, was under the command of Commodore Edward Boutwell, and it was sent to monitor the unrest in October of 1855, and her crew landed on more than one occasion to protect American interests. When Boutwell heard of the incidents involving Williams' home and store, he demanded $5,000 in compensation from King Cakobau. This initial claim was supplemented with another $40,000 in damages. The natives received a deadline saying that if they failed to pay, a landing party of Marines would be sent ashore to capture the king. Cakobau's claim to be King of Fiji was by no means universally recognized by his fellow chiefs, who jealously guarded the independence of their fiefdoms. His dilemma was that if he acknowledged the debt, he did not have sufficient funds to pay it, but that if he disclaimed it by saying that it fell under the jurisdiction of another chief, he would jeopardize his claim to the kingship, which he wanted foreign powers to recognize. He decided to bide his time, hoping that the Americans were only bluffing, but as you know, the Americans never bluff. 2 days later, 200 men from the Adams landed. Fijian warriors put up some resistance outside the town, but they were armed with very antiquated firearms as well as bow and arrows. One American was killed and 2 were wounded in the battle, and an unknown number of Fijians were casualties. Ultimately, the men of the John Adams were successful in routing the natives, but Cakobau and the survivors managed to escape capture. In the summer of 1859, 2 American citizens on Wea were killed and cannibalized by the natives. When word of the incident reached the American consulate in the area, the Pacific Squadron sent a sloop of war to investigate. The warship arrived on Uvula on October the 2nd of 1859, and an expedition was gathered as the sloop of war was unable to traverse due to its depth. A force of 10 Marines, 40 sailors, and a 12-pound howitzer were mustered for the landing on Wea. The expedition left Uvula on October the 6th of 1859 and sailed west around the northern end of the main island. At 3 o'clock on October the 9th, the Americans made a landing and marched inland towards the village of Somadi, over tropical and mountainous terrain. While climbing through the mountains, the 12-pounder was destroyed and left behind when it fell over 2,300 feet down the side of a hill. When the column reached Somadi, it was daytime, and over 300 native warriors were positioned in front of the village for defense. The Wayans wore white robes and were armed with clubs, rocks, spears, bows, and some muskets. The Americans had swords and carbine rifles, and the battle began when Lieutenant Caldwell ordered a flanking maneuver on the left side of the mass of warriors. This routed the natives, and they dispersed themselves among the town or fled into the jungle, and the Americans captured the village shortly after. The crew of the 12-pounder with no guns to fire took charge of burning the village, and over 115 huts were destroyed. All total, 14 warriors, including 2 chieftains, were counted dead after a fierce half-hour of battle. After the battle, the Americans took until October the 16th to return to the coast where the mechanic was waiting. They stopped at a friendly fishing village and spread the news of their victory. Caldwell noted that only 2 ramrods and 1 bayonet were lost during the march, and a large amount of the ammunition was used. The lieutenant received much credit for the operation, which is considered one of the most impressive military campaigns launched by the United States in the South Pacific during the 19th century. And with that, the Second Fijian Expedition came to an end.